If you're out there, we got a big show for you tonight. Say hello in the chat. I'm going to be talking about some of so that I have my notes handy and everything's ready to roll. And I'm going to riff. We're getting deep. Anybody out there tonight? Am I live in all the appropriate places? I should probably share it on my Facebook page real quick. I love starting with this beat. It's such a good one. All right. I think if I put this over here, put this behind so I can still see chat. Oh yeah, that's perfect. I think I got everything I need to get rolling now. We are ready to rock. Did this go where? Oh, it's perfect. Nice. Again, if you're out there, hello. Welcome to the stream tonight. We're going to cover kind of three main, we'll call it, categories. And we'll see how far we actually get into it. But the first one is going to have to do with this top line statement right here. Cancel culture. What is it? What do I think it is? Is it real? Is it a real problem? Obviously, if you read my title tonight, you'll get an inclination of my thoughts. But I did also write it to be sexy. Because there's ways in which I think it's not real, and some people have some justified opinions on that front. But there are ways in which I do think it's real, and I think it's really dangerous. I wanted to start tonight with this particular article. This is from Libby Hill, who I genuinely know nothing about. This is from IndieWire. I just felt that her writings capture the musings and the thoughts of many people that I have heard on this topic. And before I read hers, I'll give you an example of a lot of the common objections I hear about cancel culture. Number one, it's not real. That often what people call cancel culture is just legitimate criticism. Often, people who get quote unquote canceled aren't actually canceled. And they're still really powerful and have all the money. That even if there are excesses in cancel culture, that's justified because the harms of the people that are tending to be canceled are bigger than, or are much, much smaller than the greater harm of the victimized group that is being targeted, insofar as they are being targeted. I've heard legitimate criticisms of cancel culture as just being overblown. It doesn't really happen that much. And so, insofar as it is happening, it's not worth paying attention. There's a little bit of history there. It does go back to a few years ago. There was kind of a rash of online thinkers. A couple popular ones that come to mind are Brett Weinstein and, hey, thanks for coming, and Jordan Peterson, and a various number of people that got, Ben Shapiro, got protested on college campuses. And there was this, kind of moral panic about free speech on college campuses. And people kind of picked a side in that issue. And I found myself feeling like I was only hearing, like, some of the arguments and criticisms of so-called cancel culture I did find true at that time. Like, this wasn't really happening at every college campuses. This was probably isolated events about super political figures or super popular figures. And so they were drawing a lot of media attention, but it's not like this was happening all of the time, and who really cares? And I found some of that to be even compelling. And then what I really think changed my mind on this particular issue was what went down with Louis C.K. Louis C.K., if you watched my episode on apologies, effectively was canceled. I don't think anybody can really deny that. This dude didn't work for 2 years, and not only was he canceled, just to go back to the argument of the harm that gets caused, a whole lot of people that were currently working for a lot of projects he was involved in straight up just did not get paid. So it's not just Louis C.K. that got canceled. There's ripple effects, and there's a lot of things going on. But maybe even you think that's okay. Maybe you're like, you know what? It's deserved for the harm of the action. Once again, we're talking about marginalized groups, being it women who are commonly victims of sexual assault, whatever. If that's one of your arguments that you hold, I want to knock every single one of those down and make my case tonight in a way that's fair, in a way that respects your intelligence, because I do think those are critical points to deal with and address, and I'm not going to insult you by saying none of them hold any merit. But I also want to make my point about why I think this is such a dangerous line of reasoning and where it ends up. So this article does a really good job of actually laying this problem out. And I want to read the whole article, and then I want to come back and take it piece by piece. So let's do it. The title is Dave Chappelle's Intent Doesn't Matter, Jon Stewart. Also, cancel culture isn't real. Now, what's funny about that, she's replying to a comment that Jon Stewart very recently made. This article was from a week ago, in defense of Dave Chappelle, who has been the target of a now week-long, or I should say month-long, cancel attempt. This was the quote from Jon Stewart on October 18th. Okay? He said, we criticize... he's addressing the controversy around cancel culture and comedy. He says, what do we do for a living? We criticize, we postulate, we opine, we make jokes, and now other people are having their say. And that's not cancel culture, that's relentlessness. So, Jon Stewart is addressing his definition of cancel culture, and it's clear that he doesn't think public speech, public opinion, and criticism is cancel culture. He's saying that there's something else, and I want to make that point as well. If we were just talking about criticism of someone's views in a public space that you have access to, it's not cancel culture. Please do that. Do that all the time. That's what the whole fucking point of my show. That's what I'm doing here right now. So let's take it. Let's just read it, and we'll come back. Nearly 3 weeks after its October 5 debut on Netflix, Dave Chappelle's stand-up special, The Closer, remains embroiled in controversy. I always love when people write these things so hyperbolically. Last week, we saw the promised walkout of trans Netflix employees and allies in protest of their employer's defense of Chappelle and his increasingly trademark transphobia, taken as an assumption that is just asserted. It's automatic now. That's how the media space works. If you just repeat it often enough, it becomes true. As well as comments from Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos, in which he expressed regret regarding how the company handled employee concerns about The Closer, while continuing to defend the choice to proceed with the special. Now realizing my mic was on the wrong setting the whole time, so hopefully this sounds a little better. When we think about this challenge, we have to entertain the world. Part of that challenge means you've got audiences with various tastes, various sensibilities, various beliefs, Sarandos said. You really can't please everybody, or the content would be pretty dull. And we do tell our employees up front that we're trying to entertain our members, and that some of the content on Netflix you're not going to like. And so this kind of commitment to artistic expression and free artistic expression is sometimes in conflict with people feeling protected and safe. I do think that's something we struggle with all the time when these two values bump against each other. That was Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos' response to the criticism. Amidst all the Netflix-centric fervor of the last week, it was easy to miss another individual weighing in on the controversy. None other than Chappelle's buddy and fellow comedian, Jon Stewart. The former host of The Daily Show commented on the matter to TMZ, saying that he thought a lot of the angst could be chalked up to the miscommunication, and of Chappelle, quote, "I know his attention is never hurtful. He's not that kind of person," end quote. Chappelle, Jon Stewart, longtime very close friends. Now, that's a nice, bland answer from a friend about a friend. Very, quote, "he wouldn't harm a fly," end quote. It would be stupid to try and dissect the statement because ultimately it doesn't matter. Of course it doesn't matter because Stewart's opinion about Netflix transphobia issue objectively does not matter. But more importantly, it doesn't matter because it has nothing to do with it. See, if intent mattered, then every car accident would be no fault. If intent mattered, it wouldn't hurt when you thoughtlessly grabbed a hot pen. If intent mattered, no one would ever drown. And intent mattered, then involuntary manslaughter wouldn't be a crime punishable by law. We'll come back to that for sure. This misbegotten idea about the importance of intent belies another, more pervasive schism within a much larger conversation: cancel culture. An interesting random picture of Ricky Gervais here. Celebrities, particularly those previously or currently being held accountable for their actions, love to rage against the idea of living in a cancel culture in which you cannot disagree with popular opinion online or otherwise without being cruelly attacked and run out of the business on a rail. Comedians blame wokeness and internet mobs for defiling the sanctity of the comedy arena where anything and everything should be a punchline. The thing is, no one is stopping comedians from being edgy or offensive. Let's address if that's real. It happened to Louis C.K. My good God. Certainly not Chappelle, whose Netflix special reportedly cost the streaming giant $24 million. Kevin Hart, Ricky Gervais, Dave Chappelle, they can all say whatever they want, whenever they want. Free speech and all that jazz. But they don't get to control the narrative that results from their words, and they also don't get to remove themselves from that narrative. What's at work here is not cancel culture. It's consequences. This is a link? Oh, okay. A link to a really dumb tweet. Got it. All right. Chappelle isn't a victim. He's the perpetrator. What he's experiencing isn't an attack on his free speech. It's simply other people expressing themselves via their free speech. It's not about free speech and cancel culture. It's not even about intent versus action. It's so much simpler than that. By the way, this is a general rule for those of you who want to practice the art of critical thinking. For any issue with significant consequence that matters at all, when someone tries to tell you it's really fucking simple, they're probably a huckster. Just being real. Like, what in life that matters is simple? Let me know in the chat. I'm curious. But anyways, this is about cause and effect. If you want to dehumanize trans lives to a global audience, go for it. If a company wants to pay you millions upon millions of dollars to do it, great. But those actions have reactions, and that's not something you get to control. Today, Chappelle posted a video to Instagram addressing, but not apologizing for, the matter, claiming the reaction of the special is now threatened an upcoming documentary due to the play at film festivals about his 2020 stand-up tour. The film that I made was invited to every film festival in the United States. Some of those invitations I accepted. When this controversy came out about the closer, they began disinviting me from these film festivals, and now today, not a film company, not a movie studio, not a film festival, nobody will touch this film. Thank God for Ted Sarandos and Netflix. He's the only one that didn't cancel me yet, he said. The comedian also wanted to set the record straight about sitting down with transgender employees of Netflix. Quote, "It's been said in the press, I was invited to speak to the transgender employees of Netflix and I refused. That is not true. If they had invited me, I would have accepted it. Although I'm confused about what we would be speaking about. I said what I said, and boy, I heard what you said. My God, how could I not? You said you want a safe working environment at Netflix. It seems like I'm the only one who can't go to the office." But he also said that he has the support of the LGBTQ community and that everyone he knows from that community has been, quote, loving and supportive, so he doesn't know what this nonsense is about. And that backlash is actually about, quote, corporate interests and what can I say and what I cannot say, end quote. To review, the LGBTQ community has been so loving and supportive, it's not their fault this is happening, but it's the transgender Netflix employee's fault. So much so that he feels unsafe going to Netflix offices to sit down and not apologize to the group. The true villain is corporate interest, except not the $25 billion global monolith that is Netflix. They're the only ones not canceling him. Maybe Jon Stewart's right. Maybe his buddy's intent wasn't to hurt. Maybe he's not that kind of person. But he did, and I increasingly suspect that he is. Is what? I don't even think this is written well. And that's something Chappelle has to live with. Now, I wanted to read this article because it summarizes a bunch of different points that I want to take piece by piece here. I have empirical issues with this line of thinking. I have philosophical issues with this line of thinking. And I just want to get those made clear. So my empirical issue first. Last week saw the promised walkout of trans Netflix employees and allies in protest of their employer's defense of Chappelle and his increasingly trademarked transphobia. And then they reference the comments from Ted Sarandos. Then they reference the comments from Jon Stewart. Now, of course it doesn't matter because Stewart's opinion about the Netflix transphobia issue objectively does not matter. More importantly, it doesn't matter because that intent has nothing to do with it. If intent mattered, every car accident would be no fault. If intent mattered, it wouldn't hurt. Okay. Let's deal with the last sentence here. Involuntary manslaughter wouldn't be a crime punishable by law if intent mattered. The reason why not, the reason why, this is the stupidest thing I've ever read. It's remarkably stupid. I wish I could say meaner words about this author. Okay. Involuntary manslaughter. What does involuntary mean? Let's look it up. Done without will or conscious control? Done against someone's will? Compulsory? It's almost like you're trying to say that sometimes people have no intent or a lack of intent, and sometimes there is intent, and that's a different fucking crime. Holy shit. Like, I know I'm being loud and angry about this, but this is the stupidest thing I've ever read. If you're going to make a defense of the intent argument, this is the worst one I've ever read. Now, to be fair, because I actually do give credit to the intent doesn't matter argument. I don't think it's without merit altogether. It's true that if intent was the only thing that mattered, then it wouldn't hurt when you thoughtlessly grabbed a hot pan. Of course, intent isn't the only factor in a moral judgment, in a matter of rights and wrongs. But to say that intent doesn't matter at all because sometimes there's suffering and sometimes there's ways that you can hurt or kill somebody and you should still pay a price for that or be held responsible for that. Let me just ask you. Let's say you have a best friend. If there's somebody in chat, let me know. Run this thought experiment. Let's say you have two friends, and next weekend, both of them are involved in a very messed up situation. One of them drinks heavily, gets behind the wheel of their car, leaves the bar, and kills somebody with their car. They get a couple years for involuntary, or not involuntary, vehicular manslaughter, with the extra charge of the alcohol related to it. Now, your other friend, okay, is at that bar and starts, saying some words back and forth with somebody over a disagreement to the point where it breaks out to be physical. And in the midst of the scuffle, this friend that you have smashes the bottle to the point where it's now a sharp object fit for stabbing and stabs the other person in the neck, causing them to bleed out and die. Let me just ask you, and you can tell me in chat, which one of them are you more likely to hang out with in the future? Is it your drunk driving friend? Is there no difference between those two actions? Do you not see how intent makes that complicated? If all of a sudden you found out regarding this story with the other friend that they had actually had a gun pulled on them and they used the beer bottle technique as a matter of self-defense, now all of a sudden, does that change whether or not you want to hang out with them? And why is that? Doesn't that have to do with intent? Isn't intent the only relevant difference? The consequences are the same. Dead person on the other side of it. This is just stupid. It's the dumbest defense I've ever seen. Of course, intent isn't the only thing that matters. Impact matters a lot. But to say that it doesn't matter at all is just so stupid. All right. Now that we've dealt with that, we're going to come back to that in another article. I just kind of want to make that point. Here's another empirical problem I have. Without being cruelly attacked and run out of business on a rail, comedians blame wokeness and internet mobs for defiling the sanctity of the comedy arena where anything and everything should be a punchline. The thing is, no one is stopping comedians from being edgy or offensive, certainly not Chappelle. Well, let's see. What did the Netflix transgender employees want to have happened? They made a list of demands of Netflix. Content investment, create a new fund to specifically develop trans and non-binary talent. Fund should exist in addition to the existing Creative Equity Fund. Increased investment in trans and non-binary content on Netflix comparable to our total investment in transphobic content, including marketing and promotion. Invest in multiple trans creators to make both scripted and unscripted programs across genres. Oh, let's see here. Revise internal process on commissioning and releasing potential harmful, sensitive content, including but not limited to involving parties who are part of the subject community and can speak to potential harm, or consulting with third-party experts or vendors, which basically means don't commission content like Dave Chappelle's special. That's what they're saying here. They're saying don't put it out there. They want it gone. Many people did ask to take it down. Many people did not ask to take it down. Here's where the demands go on. Employee relations and safety. Recruit trans people, especially BIPOC, for leadership roles in the company, director, VP, etc., and promote an inclusive environment for them. Allow employees to remove themselves from previous company promotional content. Eliminate references / imagery of transphobic titles or talent inside the workplace, including murals, posters. So now they want to tell you you can't have a poster of Dave Chappelle if you're a fan of him in the office, or any of his swag or anything like that. Harm reduction. Acknowledge the harm and Netflix responsibility for this harm from the transphobic content, and in particular the harm to the Black trans community. Add a disclaimer before transphobic. Okay, this is a massive list of demands. They staged a walkout to get this accomplished. This is literally making an appeal to a powerful company to use their power to favor one voice over another. And like some of these demands are just beyond reasonable. Recruit trans people, especially BIPOC, for leadership roles in the company, and they give the example of director or VP. Do you know trans people that are qualified for director and VP roles? Great. Recommend them for the position. Why would we just promote people because they're a part of a category if they're not qualified for a job? Like, this is not the same thing. This goes back to the problems with affirmative action in general. It's like, maybe there was a time when we needed that, but even in the case of affirmative action, you're talking about a population that represents like 14% of the country. Trans people represent such a tiny fraction of the population of the United States that it's not like you're just going to trip over a bunch of trans people who are qualified to be a director or a VP of a major organization. We're talking about board positions. We're talking about really high level positions. This to me just is like a power grab that doesn't accomplish your goals. But I'll come back to that. So that's my thing here is like, you know, when you're saying that no one's stopping comedians from being edgy or offensive, literally Louis C.K. stopped working for 2 years because of cancel culture. And he apologized and demonstrated a clear understanding of wrongdoing. I encourage you to watch my episode on apologies where I talk about that case, because to me what was unfair was all of the people who missed out on their jobs working on his projects that all got stopped for something that ultimately wasn't even a crime and was something that a lot of people felt like wasn't even a matter of misconduct. But again, if you repeat it often enough in every publication, it gets accepted as truth. If you read most of the publications, what do they say about what happened with Louis C.K.? He was accused and admitted to sexual misconduct. No context. It just sexual misconduct. It's the same suitcase as it covers violent rape all the way down to, slapped a girl's butt once at a party in high school. Like, we're talking about a very, very wide array of possible harms. And again, if you just repeat it often enough, and by the way, what he did was even less bad than the thing I just mentioned. So it's actually an even bigger range than that. So it's just wild to me. What's at work here is not cancel culture, it's consequences. Chappelle isn't a victim, he's the perpetrator. Well, that depends. I mean, if they successfully make his life a living hell, make it hard for him to go everywhere, he becomes a victim pretty quickly. Once again, we did an episode on the show a couple months ago where I talked about the woman who was called the Central Park Karen. And she, in a very racist way, responded to what she felt was a threat to her life. Because the person who she was engaged with was making a threat that sounded like it could be on her life. And instead of treating that with any kind of nuance, the new culture and religion of anti-racism took over, and they made this woman's life an absolute living hell. She had to move out of the area, change her name, change her identity, not appear on camera anywhere, right? Like, you want to talk about cancel culture? This woman had to literally basically go into witness freaking protection. So that's a random citizen of New York. We're not even talking about a celebrity. So there's a lot of damage that can be done here that does make someone a victim of a very unfair crime. I don't know that that's the kind of software you want to run to take somebody in their worst minute of their worst day, and we think that it's okay to ruin people's lives after that, and then you're going to tell me that cancel culture isn't real? What? Like, just let that marinate for a minute. This is what's frustrating me on the left. It's a failure to address the complicated nature of these problems. So, I don't think there's anything else I want to address to. I think those are the two main flags I want to plant. Talking about back and forth, he makes the point that it seems like now I'm the only one who can't go to the office. And I actually think that's a point. That's my point about how there is absolutely a way in which he can become a victim. We're not even giving him room to talk about it and address it. It just gets thrown up in this article that Netflix has a lot of money and Dave Chappelle has a lot of money. So that just makes them, worse in the situation? Like, why is the amount of money here relevant? Like, we're trying to talk about, was there harm done? Was there a crime we can socially adjudicate? Even if it's not a real crime, right? Even if it's a social crime, we're trying to figure out the answer. Like, is there a harm that he is needing to apologize for? And insofar as he is, like, what should be the social consequences? It's such a cheap way of making your point or arguing when you're just like, well, Dave Chappelle and Netflix have a lot of money, so fuck them. Like, what? That's not a point. That's not an argument. You're not intelligent. Maybe his buddy's intent wasn't to hurt, but he did. All right. I want to talk about that. So philosophically, here are some things I want people to think about. There's a couple of different ways you can think about meaning and messages and people who speak to each other and harm. Philosophically and morally, I think there's a judgment that can be made based on the speaker intent. So what the speaker intends to mean. And I think it's up to the audience to then interpret that message in good faith. And by in good faith, I mean not holding somebody to the worst possible interpretation of their words and their meaning. And then using that as a rubric for all time. And I want you to think about some kind of examples here where if we ran that moral principle that no, the responsibility should actually be on the speaker to say what they mean and mean what they say. And if what they say, even if they didn't mean to or intend to harm somebody, if it could be taken as harm, that means we should hold them responsible to that interpretation of their speaking that caused that harm. And if that's the software you want to run, I want you to think about how easy these consequences can go awry on you. One example that comes to mind, and it's going to depend on where you fall on this issue, but I covered this a little while ago as well. There was a dude who got fired from his newscaster job. He was like a in the field reporter, right? He tried to say Martin Luther King Jr. Park. And or something along those lines. And he said Martin Luther King, corrects himself immediately, Jr., and then apologizes. Within 24 hours, for accidentally misspeaking, for a brief second, his words ran together and he said a syllable wrong. He was fired for using the wrong syllable by total honest mistake. No evidence of any other racism in this guy's life. No evidence of harm towards, like never had anybody ever accuse him of having racist views. Literally no one in the world thinks this guy's actually a racist, but he got fired from his job. Is that the world you want to live in? 'Cause not me. And if that's what you want to say, and that's the ethical system you want to create, I would love to debate you. And if you hear this and you want to debate me, my link is in my about page on all of my social media to get into my Discord. Come DM me, because I'm going to be fascinated if you can actually defend that as a system worth defending. But I'm almost tempted to throw it out as just madness on its face. It's very clear that there should be an obligation on the audience to interpret a speaker's message in good faith. And if there's a part of that message that comes out as offensive or hateful or angry or negative or wrong or something you don't agree with, then I think it's on you to clarify before you just take that assumption that they mean something nefarious, and give them the opportunity to tell you if they mean something nefarious or not. Turns out, actually, hateful speakers are often very upfront about their intentions. They'll tell you, I said it because I hate you. And they're very upfront about this. So I just think we need to put that into perspective. The reason for that is it comes back to the issue of free speech broadly. And in the context of free speech, it's very important that I get to make mistakes. It's also very important that I have the right to say hateful things. And that's a hard one for people to swallow, that's a right. And a lot of times this is another criticism I hear of like cancel culture. It's like, well, yeah, you have that right. Like the government can't do anything to you, but private companies can do whatever they want to you. Again, run that software all the way through. Do you really want super powerful tech companies to be the arbiters of what is allowed in terms of hate speech or not? Do you not see how easy those guns get turned against you? Yeah, they might temporarily agree with you now, but that's just based on the rules of the current social moment. That's such fraught ground to stand on. I will absolutely call you out for hate speech. If you use the gay F word in a hateful way towards a gay person, yeah, you bet I'm coming after you. But I will absolutely defend your right to do it in public on any social media platform, anywhere you want. You want to call me the gay F word and you want to do it publicly? That is your unequivocal right, as it is mine to criticize you back. And that's an important equality. Removing that right is saying we're going to take the power and shift it to whoever holds the majority currently. Does anybody see a problem with this? Does anybody see a problem with allowing the majority power holder to have the ultimate ability to silence people that don't share their values and their opinions and stifle their speech as hate speech? Hello? How about the fact that we were literally one battle of Stalingrad away from maybe having Nazi rule of the whole world? What if there was a hate speech law? I have a news for you. Whatever the Nazi definition of hate speech would have been, it wouldn't have included protecting Jews. So you gotta understand that free speech is the most important value. And just as much as I'm going to call you out and fight you with my words till the day I die for calling somebody in a harmful way the gay F word, I will fight just as hard as I fight you for saying it for your right to say it. It's really important. This is a freedom that protects marginalized people. It's the most important freedom. Dave Chappelle once said it this way. I think it was when he was accepting his Mark Twain Award. He said, this is why the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press is the First Amendment. There's a reason why it's first. The Second Amendment is in case the first one doesn't work out. What Dave Chappelle is inferring there and what he's implying and what people, I think, don't understand about this topic is there are only two ways out of any conflict. Two ways. Conversation or violence. I don't know about you, but I prefer conversation every time. When you use the power of the state to enact a law to modify the speech of others, that is an act of violence. You are using manpower to violently restrict someone else's behavior under penalty of capital losses, under penalty of losses of freedom, if we're talking jail, right? Fines or jail. You are wanting to use the body politic, the social group that's currently in power, to overpower the thing that you do not like. My question is, let's say that's what you want. And this is my same exact argument for hate speech and law, which is kind of tied into this whole concept, okay? If that's what you want to run as your social software, if that's a system you think results in a better moral outlook, how do you fight oppression if the current power becomes oppressive and that right has been stripped from you? They will just turn around and tell you that whatever you say is hate speech for disagreeing with them. This has happened. This has happened in countless numbers of societies. A lot of people don't know this. It happened in our own society. Right here in the United States of America, people got penalized for being critical of our own government. Very, very early on in this union. One of the authors of that law was Thomas Jefferson. This is a real problem. The other thing I want you to think about is goals. What are the goals of the trans employees at Netflix? Well, their demands, I don't think, are their goals. I think their demands are a representative of a facet of their goals. I think their goals are to lift trans voices, lift trans causes, and make lives better for trans people. All causes that I agree with and I understand, I have no problems with, and I think should be protected and should be honored. The problem is, here's the demands article. What this does, this specific list of demands, says that everybody else who's at this organization, meaning Netflix, that participated in the love of Dave Chappelle, and I haven't even started to talk about what he actually said yet, and that's intentional. We'll come back to it in a minute. Everything that he said is so egregious and so bad that we think the overcorrection and the overreaction that's necessary is for you to disproportionately promote and spend on content that is pro-trans and overly so in such a way that literally puts us in an advantaged position over everybody else. Well, now we have an intersectionality problem, because what about all the other marginalized groups and what's their representation and their slice of the pie, etc., etc., etc. If your goal is to lift trans people, then it is implicit in that goal to change the minds of uninformed and ignorant people so that they are more on board with what makes you who you are, so that they're more accepting of you. And if you currently think that Dave Chappelle is not accepting of you, have that conversation and adjudicate it publicly. Don't make a list of crazy demands, because these crazy demands don't accomplish your goal. It just looks like some kind of capitalist cash grab. We just want a bunch of trans people to get a bunch of extra money and power and control at Netflix. That just comes off as genuinely disingenuous. I mean, imagine if Martin Luther King, in his fight for civil rights, came out and was like, I believe that black people should take over the government. What? Dr. King? Hold on. What was that last part? Oh yeah, your whole movement's over now, by the way. Dr. King understood that that's ridiculous. We have completely lost, in modern civil rights fights, what actually makes a good civil rights fight. Good civil disobedience, good protest, good standing up for yourself, and not expecting unfair and imbalanced treatment. Dr. King wanted a guaranteed minimum income for everyone. Little white children and little black children and little Latino children and little Asian children. He wanted a guaranteed minimum income for everyone. He wanted the floor to be raised so that everyone was a little bit more equal. Does this sound like it helps the equality of everyone, or does this sound like special treatment? Again, I understand that their intentions are in the right place, and I agree with them about a great many things. But let's talk about how you actually achieve your goals. Because if they get their demands, I don't think their goals are achieved. And I want to make that point why. I need a drink. I'm parched. I'm going to take a quick break for a second. And I'm going to talk about that in the next segment here. And we'll talk about how are your goals actually achieved in this civil rights fight. Be right back. All right. If anybody's still with me, hit me in the chat. Let's talk about getting your demands and getting what you want in a fight. Actually, put a pin in that. I want to address this article first. This was an article by a man named Sam Killerman. Don't know anything about the guy, but it did bring up a point just because we were talking about intentions earlier, and it made the point really well, and I want to say that. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to highlight a couple moments. Calling a ceasefire in the war on intentions. My condolences to the families of the casualties. I meant no harm. Your intentions don't matter, your impact does is a statement that if you spend much time in social justice spaces, you've probably heard more times than you can account for. Maybe you've said it yourself or heard me say it. It's a standard issue knowledge grenade, handed out to social justice infantry everywhere, and it's something new recruits pick up quickly and are ready to lob at enemy forces at the first sight of intentions. It doesn't matter that you weren't trying to be racist. They say, pulling out the pin with their teeth, what you said was racist. Toss, fire in the hole. And the fact that you're defending your intentions is a way of defending white supremacy. Boom. So he's making that point, and then he says why we targeted intentions. Kind of explains that it's because impact really matters, and we've all seen the impact of that. Here's why we in the social justice movement are so anti-intentions. Number one, focusing on someone's positive intentions distracts us from the negative impact. Even if someone didn't mean to hurt somebody else, use a phrase that refi oppression or marginalization or domination. They did. That happened. And acknowledging the harmful impact or effect of what is important, not whether or not they were trying to cause harm. It centers the conversation on the wrong person's feelings. Often when intentions come up and we put them down, it's when a person says or does something that negatively impacts a marginalized person in relation to whom the doer holds a dominant group identity, white person saying or doing something that hurt a person of color, and any space we give to that person's intentions would prioritize their feelings instead of the hurt person's, which recreates the relevant societal power inequity, and we're re-marginalizing the marginalized person. And he talks about the impact of the outcome. And then there's a quote of, hell is paved with good intentions. Samuel Johnson said that. And another one is, most evil in this world is done by people with good intentions, which was said by T.S. Eliot. Now, intentions make something really easy complicated. He goes on to it so that, and then when intentions obviously matter. Say two young brothers are shingling the roof of a doghouse, and one of them ends up with the claw side of a hammer in the side of his skull, and hypothetically, one of the following two things led to the outcome. Brother A was swinging the hammer carelessly and hit by Brother B by mistake. Brother A looked at the claw side of the hammer, wondered what would happen if he hit Brother B in the head with it, then hit Brother B in the hammer on purpose. The outcome in both is the same. Brother B is bleeding and now knows what the sensation of metal on skull feels like. Does it matter what Brother A's intentions were? Of course it does. We'd never say it doesn't matter whether he meant it. What's done is done. If it's number one, you patch up Brother B and everyone goes back to work on the shingling. If it's number two, then Brother A's name is Zach and it's been 25 years and I still turn my back on him if he's holding a hammer. Then he talks about intention matters when you're trying to determine the next steps and when it makes sense to punish people. And it was kind of a really good article. So again, this was Sam Killerman. But I liked that. Now, back to how your goals get accomplished. It's really, really important to think about in any social justice fight what winning looks like. It's very, very important what the resolution looks like. This has been my number one problem with the work of popular figure Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, who wrote the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, as well as others. My problem with him is he says there is no such thing as not racist. There is only racist and anti-racist. Well, respectfully, I disagree. Because there's a thing such as not race. We made race. We can unmake it. Race is a social construct. It has no bearing on actual reality. Everything about race is actually just a product of social construction. So, Mr. Kendi, or I should say Dr. Kendi, if that's true, simple question, what is your goal? If you want to run your software, say, you know what, that's true, but we made race. I don't actually think we can unmake race. So we have to look at everything through the lens of race from now till forever. Okay, Dr. Kendi, great. When will it be fixed, and what would that solution look like? Because I can explain to you the end goal for removing race and deconstructing race. It's a very clear and very obvious goal. And it makes clear the type of decisions and type of actions that we would make that would move us toward or away from race as a construct. Here's one. How about race is as least interesting of a fact about a differences in persons as hair color or eye color? No one would ever be tempted to ask the question, how many blondes are on the board at Netflix? How many brunettes are represented in factories at General Electric? Does that sound like a stupid question? That's because we don't take those differences between people to be particularly interesting. Why did we make race interesting? Well, because we used it as a terrible justification to own people, among other things, and disparage them in a variety of other ways. How do we unmake it? We get back to it being as least interesting of a fact of a difference between people as hair color or eye color, to the point where it's so nonsensical to even bring it up that it's just not a problem anymore. That's what good would look like. That's what an ideal state would look like. Then no one's marginalized and everybody can actually experience real equality. Now, one of Kendi's points that I tend to agree with is that in the context of capitalism, that may not be possible. Fair point. That's one of my big problems with capitalism. And on that, Kendi and I agree. But to tell me that the answer to this is to just frame everything as either racist or anti-racist, what's your end game? What's your goal? Where's the finish line? How are your goals accomplished? And this is principally my problem at the underlying list of demands from the trans community back to Netflix. If your goal is to normalize transgenders and have everybody see that trans women are women, trans men are men, and non-binary people are just they. Okay. How do you do that by going back to the society in which you live and using the power of the state, demanding hate speech laws, demanding special capitalist privileges, and a balance in a capitalist system? Is it because defeating capitalism is hard? No shit. Why don't you talk to the socialist over here and ask us how it's going? Like, why don't you join us in the fight that actually gets us to a more equal society in ways where we can all be allies and not point your guns on somebody who could have been your ally? So let's get back to that. Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle. What did he say? Did he say that gender is a fact? Yes, he's incorrect. Gender is not a fact. That's fine. He's wrong about that. Does that make him a hateful person? Depends on his intentions. How do you know his intentions? Well, one good indicator, he's a comedian. I bet his intentions are to make me laugh. There's a lot of ways to determine intentions. Look at any references he has. Virtually everybody who knows the guy says that he's one of the most kind, wonderful people and that he actually loves the entire LGBTQ community. Okay? That seems like a pretty good piece of evidence to analyze his intentions. Is it possible that he means well and he's just wrong and he doesn't understand it because these concepts are complicated and not everything is so fucking simple? Like this idiot person wrote in this article that it's actually exceedingly simple. Just to come back to my original point that if someone tells you something's really, really simple about a sociological problem, they're a fucking huckster and they don't know what they're talking about. They're trying to sell you down a river. They are a liar. There's nothing simple about any of this. It's really complicated. It's really complicated. So he did say that. He did say gender is a fact. He's wrong about that. He also said, I'm Team TERF, and I defend J.K. Rowling. He asked the trans community to give up the baby. He also said some other things that I didn't find correct. At any point, did I watch that and think, here's a guy who hates trans people? No, I didn't. Because what else did he say? He said trans women are women. And he said, but those pussies they got aren't real pussies. It's like beyond pussy or impossible pussy, which is objectively a hilarious joke. Like, that's really funny. Really fucking funny. I have told a trans person that to their face. They know who they are. They thought that shit was funny. So, here's the opportunity cost. The goal is to change people's minds. You're going to have some imperfect allies along the way. It's going to take time. Not everybody's going to get all the way to your position all at once. We understand this empirically sometimes and can accept incremental progress in certain things, but apparently not in this situation. Dave Chappelle, in one of his earlier specials, once joked that Brown versus Board of Education was 1965, and he got called the N-word in traffic on Tuesday. Progress is slow. He was making the point that African Americans understand this fact, accept this fact, live with this fact, and try to deal with the implications of that fact in a healthy way. Human progress is slow. Sometimes on certain issues, we're quicker than others. For the trans community, they've got a tough road ahead. There's no doubt about it. And I have a lot of empathy for them, for something that I don't fully understand, and I'm not working it out. But I myself have questions. What does the end goal look like? What does it actually mean to be accepted for who you are? What does it actually mean to have a self-image? And a lot of these questions are unanswered. I personally don't even think the self is real. I think the self is an illusion. That's a really complex and nuanced point that requires a lot of discussion, a lot of back and forth, and a lot of philosophy. And I'm not the only one making it. You can have a personal first-person experience where your sense of an ego melts away and you aren't identified with any kind of identity at all, not even your own fucking name. So what does it mean? I think that someone's gender, whether it be non-binary, whether they feel more like a boy, more like a girl, more like a man, more like a woman, or whether they feel like some gender that is to date undefined, that we haven't created, or they feel like a third gender. I've read about societies that have a third gender, which is kind of more, there's like man, woman, and then kind of an effeminate man. I believe in a society where that gender part is one of the least interesting facts about you, like hair color, like eye color, like race, like skin color, like any of these other differencing factors that make us different from each other. That would be my end goal. If you don't share it and you're trans, okay, what's yours look like? And let's negotiate that. Let's understand it. But I think in a lot of cases, that's people's points, is there's a way to state this. And there's a way to have this discussion where no one needs to be lost on the battlefield of a culture war. We don't have to pay these casualties. And you certainly don't have to demand that no one else gets to watch Dave Chappelle. And here's why it's stupid if you do. Here's my most important argument that I will say tonight. And I might actually close on this one and move to the face, because I think I want to hit this punchline hard. Let's say you win and you get your demands. And Dave Chappelle's effectively canceled as content is removed off of Netflix. How does any new person get to know why what he said was hateful? How do you get to make your argument? You've successfully removed it from the public discourse. No one's learned anything by that. Again, there's two ways that you could have went about it. You could have ran a headline on every newspaper in America. Dave Chappelle, most famous comedian on earth, says trans women are women. Subtitle: we've made a lot of progress, but we still have room to grow. And here's some of the things Dave said that weren't correct. Maybe you think they were funny, or maybe you don't. But what's clear is Dave Chappelle's a fucking comedian and not a social scientist or not anything, really. He's not even like an intellectual. I don't even know if the dude has a degree. I mean, he's very smart, but like, he's not an expert in any particular field. So have that conversation and have it publicly. How do you reach your goal of changing anyone's minds by using the power of the society and the people around you to shut that person down? So I want you to ask yourself one last thought experiment for me to close out the point on the way to actually beat back hateful ideology and things that you disagree with and how it works. And the thought experiment is very, very simple. Imagine you were at a dinner table with 10 other equals of various backgrounds. And you're all peers and you're all sitting down at this table, and someone stands up and says, I think the 10 of us should band together and form a Vanilla Ice hate group. Okay. Well, why should we do that? If your immediate question is why should we do that, how does taking Dave Chappelle's special down allow anybody the opportunity to question anything? That'd be the equivalent of that person standing up there and saying that among to you 10 people, and you go into those 9 other people, and instead of actually trying to engage with that ridiculous sentiment, going, I think person down there that wants us to form a Vanilla Ice hate group is evil and bad, and we should literally put a sock in his mouth so he's no longer able to speak as a member of this group again. Does anybody learn anything? Does anybody's experience get better? No, you just you punish that one person, nobody gets anywhere, no progress is made. I care about human progress, real progress. I hear about changing minds, real minds. And no one's mind gets changed when you stifle speech you do not agree with. If you want to win, you have to make the better argument. And you have to win people to your side. And that's hard work. It's gritty work. Ask the people that have gone and done it before you. It's still not all the way done. This is a tough one. It comes back that I will defend your unequivocal right to say really offensive shit to me. And you can be funny about it, and I'll laugh. I will laugh. But if you're going to claim that your statements are true or hold merit, or reveal truth, I'm going to debate you. And if I'm confident that I'm right, then my arguments should stand for themselves and be appealing enough and attractive enough to bring others over to my side and win the day. That's how reason works. That's the Socratic method. That's the point of philosophy. And we used to understand that in this country, and now we don't. The reason why Dr. King's civil rights movement was so successful was principally because of the non-violence. Not apathy, not passive resistance, active resistance. They stood in the streets together. They made their case. They let their voices be heard. They held up signs. And they won with their message, not their fists. We only have two ways out of any conflict: conversation or violence. And we come crawling back to the powerful, and you cry about what's happened to you, and you demand that the powerful settle your dispute for you. All you are is an adult tattletale that doesn't want to stand up for what's right in a real and meaningful way that brings about lasting, sustainable change. Because if you win temporarily and you win in the day and we silence Dave Chappelle, the next one that pops up is going to wait until they have more power than Dave Chappelle ever had. And that's when they're going to be the hateful one. And now they're going to use that same logic that was flawed from the beginning and use it against you and turn those guns on you. And you're going to be fucked. There's a recent statistic. I don't remember who the woman is. It's a TED Talk. Let me see if I can pull this up on YouTube and find her moment. I watched it earlier today as I was preparing for the show today. And yes, I actually do prepare for this, even if it sounds like I'm off the cuff for most of the time. Let's see here. Here it is. See if I can find this graph. Here it is. Okay, I have this muted. I just want you to see the graph. This is success rates of nonviolent and violent campaigns for freedom. And by the way, this isn't about civil rights. This is about actually getting your freedom from an oppressive dictator that has a military. And even in that case, when they have the guns and you don't, nonviolence, look at the success rate compared to violence. It's double. It's more than double. Partial success, still double. The failure rate overall of violent uprisings against dictators, against oppressive systems, is in the neighborhood of 60%. Maybe you disagree with me that this type of cancel culture I'm referring to is violence. Okay, let's have that debate. Let me know in Discord. Let's have that chat. Maybe you disagree with me that there's a success rate or that it's different than this chart right here. Maybe you disagree with some of my premises or my conclusion. My whole point is that how easy would it be for me to just say, well, what I'm saying is the truth, and now you're doing hate speech against philosophers because you're denying my ability to make arguments, and therefore, you should be punished for that hate speech. That's pretty easy to say. Would anybody take it seriously or hold it up? No. So we shouldn't entertain it in any other domain of discourse. Instead, let's put my arguments against yours and let's debate it out. That's how the Socratic method works. That's how we get at truth. It's not by using the power of capitalism or the power of the state to silence other people, lessen their influence, or do anything like that. Especially not people who are actually probably your ally, which is what I suspect in the case of Dave Chappelle. I suspect that we're talking about a guy, because all the evidence points to this, that is 100% on the side of the marginalized LGBTQ community. And he is vastly confused about the difference between sex and gender. And that's okay. That's okay. He said trans women are women. That's progress. Let's take the fucking win and not try to run up the score and not try to embarrass our opponent. And let's graciously take the win, hold up their hand as the changed person, even if we understand that they still oppose us on some things and we're still working through it. Conversation or violence? What's your choice? With that ends my topic for tonight. And I hope you have enjoyed this chat. Once again, I had a guest originally for this who couldn't make it. So I'd love to do a follow-up. Hopefully she'll listen to it, and then maybe we can do a follow-up. And if she still disagrees with me, because I think she does disagree with me, I would love for her to come back and respond. And we can have that conversation. And we can deal with the points I made that made sense or didn't make sense. Oh boy. The Onion has delivered for us tonight. As always, here on the Average People Talking Show, we end with an Onion article or two. Because we have to laugh. We have to laugh to avoid from crying. And satire of how fucked up our politics are in America is just the best way to do it as far as I'm concerned. Biden's social spending bill whittled down to $10 billion check to Joe Manchin. At last, striking compromise that unites all 50 Democrats in the Senate, the White House announced Wednesday that it had enough votes to pass a streamlined version of President Joe Biden's social spending bill that had been stripped of every provision except for a $10 billion check for Senator Joe Manchin. While we didn't get everything we wanted, the important thing is that we reached an agreement that represents this country's largest ever public investment in Joe Manchin, said Biden. Noted that he ran for president as a consensus candidate and that the revised legislation, which removes broadly popular sections of the bill, including clean energy program, paid family leave, and a tax on billionaires' assets, apparently reflected Senate consensus. This is how you get things done in a democracy. These funds will go out immediately and provide assistance to a lawmaker who is currently struggling in West Virginia and will now, thanks to our efforts over these many months, see his net worth increase many, many times over. We still have one more work to do, but this is an important first step. Administration officials added that they still believe Senate Democrats can use the budget reconciliation process to push through an additional measure addressing whatever the hell it is that Kirsten Sinema wants. That's good. Well done, Onion. Well done. Oh my God. Okay, this one's too good. We got to do this one too. Kyle Rittenhouse claims self-defense after shooting 3 jurors. Kenosha, Wisconsin. Arguing that he had no choice but to take the law into his own hands, Kyle Rittenhouse reportedly claimed self-defense Wednesday after shooting 3 jurors in his trial for multiple counts of first-degree homicide. Finding himself outnumbered by a mob of 20 jurors, Mr. Rittenhouse was forced to make the split-second decision to save his own life, said defense attorney Mark Richards, who presented the remaining members of the jury with a series of photographs that he argued showed the dead jurors armed with water bottles, heavy stacks of evidence, and other potential deadly weapons they could have used to harm the teenager. Kyle came to this courthouse with the best of intentions. At these courtroom agitators appeared, they wanted to take these weapons away and potentially send him to jail for decades. So he made the smart and swift decision to protect himself and others. Frankly, any sane person put in his shoes would have done the same. Richards went on to share video evidence that he alleged showed members of the jury jumping out of their seats to riot the moment they saw Rittenhouse's assault rifle. You know, the Onion has a way of just taking something and making it very clear why what he did was so fucked up. And I wasn't going to get on the soapbox because it's played out. But Kyle Rittenhouse, I don't care how young he is, you're a piece of shit, dude. You walk into a known, basically, race riot with a rifle, and then people react to you, and then you claim self-defense, but you weren't the aggressor, even though you're just walking around the streets with a fucking assault rifle. Get out of here. I hope they throw him. I hope they throw him in for a long time. If you're on the side of defending this dude and what he did, I don't even want to actually have a conversation with you. Educate yourself and learn about it. Like, the argument is not in your favor. Read anybody who disagrees with you that's smarter than me about it, because I don't have the energy. But Kyle Rittenhouse is a piece of shit, and he deserves life in jail for what he did. He absolutely deserves life in jail for what he did. So, yeah, that's it. Anywho, that's it for the show tonight. Thanks for coming. Love y'all. Hit me up in the Discord if you want to debate any of these things that I said today, except Kyle Rittenhouse. It's not up for debate. He deserves jail. He murdered people. Have a good night.